The great hall of Zentara Prime buzzed with excitement. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for the most important meeting of the year. Admiral Hyan Wu stood at the center of the massive room, his blue uniform gleaming under the bright lights. In front of him floated a holographic map that showed the entire known galaxy. The map was beautiful. Thousands of star systems glowed like tiny jewels, connected by bright lines that showed trade routes and communication pathways. Different colors marked the territories of various alien species. The Talarian Empire appeared in deep blue, the Vorthan territories in red, and the Nexus Alliance in green. Everything looked organized and peaceful. But there was something strange about the map. In one section, near what humans called the Orion Arm, there was nothing. Just empty black space with a few old symbols that most people had forgotten how to read. The symbols looked ancient and worn, like warnings carved in stone by people long dead. Admiral Hyunwoo cleared his throat. Council members, this is our most complete galactic map to date. As you can see, we have successfully mapped 97% of known space. Trade is flowing, borders are secure, and peace remains strong throughout our territories. Murmurs of approval filled the hall. The various alien species nodded their heads or made whatever gestures their biology allowed to show agreement. This was exactly what they wanted to hear. Counselor Dae-ho stood up from his seat. He was a Vorthon, a species known for their aggressive nature and military strength. His red skin gleamed under the lights, and his 4 arms moved as he spoke. Admiral, what about that empty region, the one with those old marks? Surely we should expand into that area. My scouts report rich mineral deposits and possibly habitable worlds. The Admiral shifted uncomfortably. Counselor Dae-ho, those symbols are warning markers. They've been there for over 800 years. Our historical records suggest that regions should remain undisturbed. A young woman in the green uniform of the Nexus Alliance jumped to her feet. Commander So Young was ambitious and eager to make her mark on galactic politics. With respect, Admiral, warnings from 8 centuries ago hardly apply to our modern civilization. We have technology those ancient people could never dream of. If there are resources in that region, the Confederation has a duty to claim them for the benefit of all member species. More voices joined the discussion. Representatives from smaller species saw an opportunity to gain access to new resources. Military commanders spoke about the strategic importance of controlling more territory. Everyone seemed to agree that the empty region represented opportunity, not danger. In the back of the hall, an old figure slowly stood up. Keeper Min-ho was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species. His bent frame and slow movements made some of the younger representatives roll their eyes. They saw him as a relic from a more primitive time. "If I may speak," Min-ho said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his aged appearance. "Those warnings exist for good reason. I have studied the ancient texts. There are stories about that region, stories about those who lived there. They speak of sleeping giants, of powers beyond our understanding." Counselor Dae-ho laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the hall. "Keeper Min-ho, with all due respect to your years of service, we cannot base policy on old stories and legends. This is the age of science and reason. We have ships that can cross the galaxy in days, weapons that can crack moons, and shields that can stop any attack. What could possibly threaten the combined might of the Galactic Confederation?" The old keeper's eyes grew sad. "You young ones have forgotten too much." There are forces in this galaxy older and more powerful than our Confederation. The empty region on that map is not empty because we haven't explored it. It's empty because we were told to stay away. Told by whom? Commander So Young demanded. Show us evidence, not stories. Minho looked around the hall at all the eager, confident faces. The evidence lies in our survival. For 800 years we have prospered because we respected those boundaries. The warnings are not suggestions. They are treaties, agreements made by our ancestors with powers we no longer remember. But his words fell on deaf ears. The council had already made up their minds. The vote was swift and decisive. By a margin of 87 to 13, the Galactic Confederation approved immediate expansion into the unmarked region. Captain Wanbin received his orders 3 days later. He was a career military officer, proud of his service record and confident in his abilities. His flagship, the Sovereign Dawn, was the most advanced vessel in the Confederation fleet. Along with 12 other ships, he would lead the expedition into the mysterious region. As the fleet prepared to depart, Wanbin studied the old warnings one more time. The symbols were definitely ancient, carved in a style that predated most known civilizations. But they were just symbols. Whatever power had placed them there was surely long gone. The journey to the unmarked region took 5 days at maximum warp speed. Wanbin's fleet traveled in perfect formation, their sensors sweeping space ahead of them for any signs of danger. The region appeared completely empty. No ships, no space stations, no signs of civilization at all. See? Commander So Young said during a communication from her escort vessel. Nothing but empty space and old fears. We'll establish our first outpost on that mineral-rich planet in the third system. Within a year, this entire region will be contributing to Confederation prosperity. But as they crossed the invisible boundary marked by the ancient warnings, something changed. Deep space monitoring stations that had been silent for centuries suddenly came to life. Automated systems began sending signals across vast distances, messages traveling faster than any known technology could achieve. The signals reached their destinations in minutes rather than the days or weeks such distances should have required. On hidden worlds throughout the region, beings who had been living quiet lives suddenly stopped what they were doing. They looked up at their skies with expressions of concern and perhaps sadness. Captain Wanbin noticed none of this. His sensors showed empty space, dead worlds, and nothing that could threaten his powerful fleet. He gave the order to begin deep scans of the nearest star system, completely unaware that he had just triggered an alert system that spanned half the galaxy. On the third day in the region, as Wanbin's fleet approached their target planet, something finally appeared on their sensors. A single ship, smaller than any of their vessels, was moving toward them at impossible speed. It had appeared from nowhere, as if it had simply materialized in space. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Wanbin of the Galactic Confederation fleet. You are in violation of our territorial claims. Identify yourself immediately. The response came in perfect galactic standard, spoken by a calm female voice. This is Lieutenant Commander Yunji of the Soul's Pride. You have entered restricted space. State your business or prepare to be escorted out. Wanbin stared at his communication screen in disbelief. The ship was tiny compared to his dreadnoughts, yet the pilot was giving him orders. I don't know who you are or what authority you think you have, but this region is now under Confederation control. Stand down immediately. The small ship continued its approach, moving with a grace that made Wanbin's advanced vessels look clumsy by comparison. Captain, I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. You are not welcome here. Wanbin had heard enough. All ships, prepare for engagement. We'll show these primitives what happens when they challenge the Confederation. As his fleet powered up their weapons and moved into attack formation, Captain Wanbin felt confident in his overwhelming advantage. He had 13 of the most powerful ships in the galaxy against one small vessel piloted by someone who clearly didn't understand the situation. He was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is forgetting that there are powers older and stronger than your own. Lieutenant Commander Yun-Ji sat in the pilot's chair of the Soul's Pride, watching the Confederation fleet arrange itself for battle. Her ship was small compared to the massive vessels bearing down on her, but she felt no fear. She had trained for this moment her entire career, though she had hoped it would never come. The Soul's Pride was not what it appeared to be. While the Confederation sensors registered it as a simple patrol craft, they could not detect the true nature of its construction. The hull was composed of materials that did not exist in Confederation science. The power source drew energy from dimensions the aliens had never discovered. The weapon systems operated on principles that would take their scientists centuries to understand. Captain Wanbin, Yun-Ji said calmly into her communicator, I'm going to give you one more chance to withdraw. Your ships are impressive, but you are out of your depth here. Please don't make me demonstrate why humans prefer to be left alone. Wanbin's face appeared on her screen, red with anger and disbelief. Humans? What are humans? You're making a serious mistake if you think one small ship can threaten an entire Confederation fleet. I'm giving you 30 seconds to surrender before we destroy you. Yun-Ji sighed softly. They had forgotten. After 800 years of peaceful isolation, the galaxy had actually forgotten that humans existed. The thought made her both sad and angry. Computer, record this encounter for historical purposes. Begin Combat Protocol 7 Alpha. The Soul's Pride suddenly changed. What had appeared to be a simple patrol vessel revealed its true nature as adaptive camouflage fell away. The ship's hull gleamed with an inner light, and energy patterns danced across its surface like living things. It began to move in ways that defied everything the Confederation knew about physics. Wanbin watched in horror as the small human ship simply vanished from his sensors, reappearing instantly behind his flagship. Before he could react, precise energy beams struck 3 of his escort vessels. The weapons cut through their advanced shields like they were made of paper, but stopped just short of causing any casualties. Each ship was left helpless, their engines dead and their weapons offline, but their crews completely unharmed. How is this possible? Commander So Young's voice crackled over the communication channel from her disabled vessel. Our shields are the most advanced in the galaxy. Yun-Ji's ship reappeared directly in front of Wanbin's flagship, close enough that he could see details of its construction through his viewing window. The technology was unlike anything in Confederation records. The hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and strange symbols glowed along its surface with their own inner light. Your shields are impressive for your level of development, Yun-Ji replied, her voice still calm and professional. But you're dealing with technology that's had 8 centuries to advance without the limitations of galactic politics and warfare. Captain Wanbin, I've disabled 3 of your ships to demonstrate that I could have destroyed them just as easily. Please consider this your final warning. Wanbin stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His sensors showed that the human ship was somehow existing in multiple locations at once, as if it existed partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. His weapons officers reported that they couldn't get a targeting lock on something that wasn't entirely there. "This is impossible," Wanbin muttered. "No single ship can outclass an entire fleet." "You're thinking about this wrong," Yunji said, apparently able to hear his private comments. "You're not facing a single ship. You're facing the will of an entire civilization that values peace above all else. The soul's pride isn't just my vessel, Captain. It's connected to every human ship, every human world, every human mind. When you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us." The truth of her words became apparent as Wanbin's long-range sensors picked up new contacts. Ships were appearing throughout the region, materializing from whatever hiding places they had occupied. Not dozens, but hundreds of vessels, all moving, with the same impossible grace as the soul's pride. Commander So Young's voice came over the communication channel, filled with fear. "Captain, my science officer says these ships are operating on principles we don't understand. Their energy, signatures don't match anything in our databases. It's like they're using a completely different kind of science." Yunji allowed herself a small smile. "We call it mature science, Commander. What you call impossible, we call Tuesday. Captain Wanbin, you have two choices. You can withdraw your fleet immediately and report to your superiors that humans still exist and still prefer to be left alone. Or you can continue this confrontation and learn exactly why the galaxy's maps show empty space where human territory begins." Wanbin looked around his bridge at his frightened crew. His tactical officer was reporting that the human ships had completely surrounded his fleet without appearing on sensors until the last moment. His communications officer had detected transmissions moving between the human vessels at speeds that exceeded the theoretical maximum for any known technology. "What do you want?" Wanbin asked, his earlier confidence completely gone. "What we've always wanted," Yunji replied. "To be left alone to live our lives in peace. Your people signed agreements with ours centuries ago. Treaties that established clear boundaries and mutual respect. Those agreements kept the peace for 800 years. The fact that you've forgotten them doesn't make them less valid." "I don't know anything about any treaties," Wanbin said desperately. "The Council authorized this expedition to claim unoccupied territory. We meant no harm. Intent matters less than action, Captain. You entered our space with a military fleet and began scanning our worlds without permission. In our culture, that's called an act of war. The fact that we're talking instead of fighting should tell you something about how much we value peace." Yunji paused for a moment, consulting displays that Wanbin couldn't see. "I'm transmitting the coordinates of your nearest border. You have 6 hours to reach it. Any Confederation vessel found in human space after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." "What about our disabled ships?" Commander So Young asked. "They'll be repaired automatically once you cross the border," Yunji said. "Consider it a gesture of goodwill. But understand this clearly. There will be no second warning. If the Confederation sends another fleet into our territory, we will respond differently." Wanbin wanted to ask what she meant by that, but something in her tone suggested he didn't really want to know. "What should I tell the Council?" "Tell them that humanity remembers the old agreements," Yunji said as the soul's pride began to move away. "We suggest they do the same. Your ancestors were wise enough to understand that some sleeping giants should be left undisturbed. We hope their descendants will prove equally wise." The human ships began to disappear one by one, vanishing as mysteriously as they had appeared. Within minutes, the Soul's Pride was alone with the damaged Confederation fleet, hanging in space like a reminder of how quickly superior technology could turn the tables. Wanbin gave the order to retreat. As his fleet limped toward the border, he tried to process what had just happened. His 13 advanced warships had been effortlessly outclassed by vessels that operated on principles he couldn't even understand. The humans had demonstrated the ability to disable his fleet without causing a single casualty, showing a level of control that was somehow more terrifying than raw destructive power. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "I'm detecting a transmission from the human ship. It's addressed to the Galactic Council." Wanbin nodded grimly. "Put it through." Yunji's voice filled the bridge one last time. "To the leaders of the Galactic Confederation. You have forgotten who we are, so let me remind you. We are the species that helped your ancestors establish the first interstellar governments. We are the ones who taught you that civilization was possible among the stars. We withdrew from galactic affairs not because we were weak, but because we believed you had learned enough to govern yourselves wisely." Her voice carried a weight of sadness that made everyone on the bridge uncomfortable. "Today's events suggest we may have been overly optimistic. The old treaties still stand, and we still prefer peace to conflict. But make no mistake, we are not helpless refugees hiding in empty space. We are humanity, and we remember who we are even if you have forgotten. Govern yourselves accordingly." The transmission ended, leaving Wanbin's fleet alone in the vast darkness of space. Behind them lay human territory, now clearly marked by the knowledge of what dwelt there. Ahead lay the Confederation, waiting for news of their glorious expansion into empty space. Wanbin looked at his tactical display one more time, noting the casual ease with which the humans had handled his entire fleet. Whatever the Galactic Confederation thought it knew about warfare and technology, the humans were operating on a completely different level. As they crossed back into Confederation space, Wanbin began composing his report, wondering how he could possibly explain to the Council that their expansion into empty space had awakened something that made their proudest achievements look like children's toys. The galaxy was about to learn that some empty spaces on the map were empty for very good reasons. Keeper Minho walked slowly through the ancient corridors beneath Zentara Prime, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, making the carved symbols seem to dance and shift. These archives had been sealed for generations, visited only by a few dedicated historians who understood their value. The reports from Captain Wanbin's failed expedition had disturbed Minho deeply. The casual way the Council had dismissed his warnings, the eager rush to violate boundaries that had kept the peace for centuries, and now the devastating news that humanity was not only real, but far more powerful than anyone had imagined. "Keeper." "Minho?" a young voice called from behind him. "Are you certain we should be down here?" Minho turned to see archivist Hye-jin approaching carefully, her arms full of scanning equipment and data storage devices. She was young and brilliant, one of the few people who still believed that old knowledge had value in the modern galaxy. "My dear Hye-jin," Minho said with a sad smile, "we should have been down here long ago. The Council's ignorance has put us all in danger. If we're going to survive what's coming, we need to understand what our ancestors knew about humanity. They entered the deepest vault of the archives, a chamber that had been sealed since before either of them was born. Ancient environmental systems hummed to life, recognizing their genetic patterns and granting them access to knowledge that most of the galaxy had forgotten. The walls were lined with data crystals, each one containing thousands of years of historical records. Some were so old that they predated the Galactic Confederation itself, reaching back to the earliest days of interstellar civilization. Minho approached a section marked with symbols that matched those from the galactic map. "Start with these," he told Hyejin, indicating a cluster of crystals that glowed with a faint blue light. "These contain the original treaties and agreements that established our current borders. Somewhere in there should be the truth about humanity." Hyejin activated her scanning equipment and began downloading the contents of the first crystal. The information was massive, containing detailed records of diplomatic meetings, trade agreements, and territorial disputes spanning centuries. But what she found made her gasp in surprise. "Keeper, look at this," she said, her voice filled with excitement and fear. "This is a treaty signed 847 years ago. It's called the Terran Compact, and it's signed by representatives of 17 different species, including humans." Minho hurried to her side, his old eyes struggling to read the ancient text. "What does it say?" Hyejin's voice trembled as she read. "It establishes human space as an autonomous region in exchange for humanity's complete withdrawal from galactic politics. The humans agreed to isolate themselves and not interfere in the affairs of other species. In return, all other signatories agreed to respect human territorial boundaries and never enter human space without explicit permission." "And the consequences for violation?" Minho asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Hyejin scrolled through more of the document. "It says here that humanity reserves the right to defend their territory by any means necessary. It also mentions that human military technology is classified at the highest levels, and that no detailed information about human capabilities will be shared with non-human species." Minho nodded grimly. "Keep reading. There must be more. Over." The next several hours, they uncovered a treasure trove of forgotten information. The archives contained detailed records of humanity's role in early galactic civilization, and the picture that emerged was staggering. Humans had not been minor players in early galactic politics. They had been the peacekeepers, the mediators, the species that other civilizations turned to when conflicts threatened to tear apart the fragile bonds of interstellar society. Their technology had been advanced even then, and their diplomatic skills had prevented dozens of wars. "Listen to this," Hyejin said, reading from another crystal. "This is a report from Ambassador Kektal of the Vorthon Empire, dated 851 years ago. He's describing a meeting with a human diplomat named Director Ji-Hoon." She cleared her throat and began to read. "The human representative arrived aboard a vessel unlike anything in our fleets. When asked about its construction, he simply smiled and said that humanity preferred peaceful solutions to problems. He then proceeded to mediate our border dispute with the Nexus Alliance in less than 3 hours, proposing a solution that satisfied everyone involved. I am forced to conclude that humanity possesses both technological and intellectual capabilities far beyond our current understanding." Minho felt a chill run down his spine. "What else does it say?" Ambassador Kektal goes on to recommend that the Vorthon Empire avoid any direct conflicts with humanity at all costs. He says, and I quote, "I have the distinct impression that we are dealing with a species that chooses to appear weak rather than one that actually is weak. The casual ease with which they solve problems that stump our best minds suggests capabilities we cannot even imagine." They found more records, each one painting a clearer picture of what humanity had been. Reports of human ships that could cross the galaxy in days when other species needed months. Accounts of human mediators who seemed to know the solutions to problems before they were even fully explained. Stories of human technology that operated on principles no other species could understand. But the most disturbing records were the casualty reports from those who had tested humanity's patience. "Here," He-Jin said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is a report from the Nexus Alliance about the destruction of their third fleet. Apparently, they tried to claim a system that humans had marked as off-limits." Min-Ho leaned closer. "What happened to them?" "The report says the entire fleet simply vanished. No distress signals, no wreckage, no trace that they had ever existed. The only evidence was a single message transmitted on all frequencies in the local system. The boundaries have been explained. Respect them." They found more such reports. Entire military forces that had disappeared without a trace after violating human space. Planets that had experienced sudden natural disasters immediately after their governments had threatened human territories. In every case, the message was clear. Humanity preferred peace, but they were perfectly capable of enforcing it. "How did we forget all this?" Haya-Jin asked, her face pale as she read report after report of humanity's overwhelming power. Min-Ho was studying a particularly ancient crystal, one that seemed to contain the original justification for the Terran Compact. "According to this, we didn't forget. We were made to forget." "What do you mean?" "Look at these psychological evaluation reports," Min-Ho said, pointing to sections of the data. "The other species were so intimidated by humanity's capabilities that they couldn't function normally. Trade decreased. Exploration stopped. Scientific advancement slowed. The mere knowledge that humans existed and could intervene at any time was paralyzing galactic civilization." Hye-Jin found the relevant section and read it aloud. "The presence of humanity in galactic affairs, while beneficial for maintaining peace, has created a dependency that prevents other species from developing their own capabilities. Several member species have reported that their populations live in constant fear of human judgment. Others have become so reliant on human mediation that they cannot resolve even minor disputes independently. So humanity chose to withdraw," Min-Ho said, understanding flooding through him. "They removed themselves from galactic politics not because they were forced to, but because their very presence was preventing other species from growing up. It says here that Director Ji-Hoon made a speech to the Galactic Assembly," Hye-Jin continued. "He said, 'We have become a crutch that prevents you from learning to walk on your own. We will withdraw to our own space and allow you to develop without our interference. Perhaps in time you will become the civilization we hoped you could be.'" Min-Ho felt tears in his old eyes. "And we did grow, for a while. The Confederation became strong and stable. We developed our own technology, solved our own problems, built our own peace. We became so successful that we forgot we had ever needed help. Until now," Hye-Jin said quietly. "Until we forgot that some boundaries exist for everyone's protection." They worked through the night, uncovering more and more evidence of humanity's true nature. The picture that emerged was of a species so advanced, so powerful, and so wise that they had voluntarily exiled themselves rather than rule over everyone else. They had chosen isolation over dominion, preferring to let other species find their own way, even if it meant accepting the risk that those species might eventually challenge them. "Keeper," Hye-Jin said, as dawn light began to filter down into the archives. What do we do with this information? Minho looked at the vast collection of data they had uncovered, knowledge that could change everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity and itself. We prepare, he said simply. We gather evidence and we prepare to show the Council exactly what they've awakened. Do you think they'll listen? Minho considered the question carefully. Some will, others won't. But ready or not, the galaxy is about to remember why those empty spaces on the map were left empty. Captain Wanbin's encounter was just the Admiral J. Wan stood before the massive observation window of New Busan Station, watching the stars that had been humanity's home for 8 centuries. The orbital platform was one of dozens that served as administrative centers for human space, each one larger and more advanced than anything the Galactic Confederation had ever built. Behind him, the Human Defense Council was gathering for an emergency session. Representatives from Earth, the colonial worlds, and the deep space exploration fleets were arriving through transportation methods that would have seemed like magic to outside observers. Some materialized directly in the conference room through quantum teleportation. Others arrived in personal craft that folded space around themselves to cross vast distances in minutes. General Su Jin was the first to speak as the meeting began. She had commanded Earth's military forces for 30 years, though her youthful appearance suggested someone much younger. Life extension technology had given humanity centuries to perfect not just their science, but their wisdom as well. The situation report from Lieutenant Commander Yunji is troubling, she said, activating a holographic display that showed the encounter with the Confederation fleet. They clearly have no memory of the Terran Compact or our previous interactions. After 8 centuries of peaceful isolation, they see our space as empty territory to be claimed. Director Young Sik leaned forward in his chair. He oversaw the Colonial Defense Force, the organization responsible for protecting humanity's scattered settlements throughout their territory. The question is whether this was an isolated incident or the beginning of a larger pattern. Our deep space monitors have detected increased Confederation activity along our borders. Admiral J. Wan turned from the window to face the Council. I've reviewed the historical records. This is exactly what we feared might happen when we signed the Terran Compact. We hoped that by removing ourselves from galactic affairs, other species would learn to govern themselves wisely. Instead, they've become so successful that they've forgotten why they needed to be careful in the first place. Captain Yunji appeared in the room through quantum projection, her image transmitted instantaneously from her ship near the border. Admirals, with respect, Captain Wanbin and his crew seemed genuinely surprised to encounter us. They had no idea humans existed, let alone that we controlled this region of space. This wasn't malicious aggression. It was ignorance. Ignorance can be just as dangerous as malice, General Su Jin replied. Perhaps more so. A malicious enemy can be reasoned with or deterred. An ignorant one might stumble into a conflict neither side wants. The Council reviewed humanity's current capabilities, information that would have terrified the Confederation if they had access to it. Human technology had advanced exponentially during their centuries of isolation, without the need to maintain compatibility with alien systems or limit their development to avoid intimidating other species. They had achieved breakthroughs that bordered on the miraculous. Their ships could fold space-time for instantaneous travel across any distance. Their weapons could manipulate matter at the molecular level, allowing them to disable enemy vessels without harming their crews. Their defensive systems existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them effectively impossible to attack using conventional weapons. But more importantly, humanity had achieved something that had eluded them throughout their earlier history: true unity of purpose. The devastating wars of their past had taught them the value of cooperation and the dangers of unchecked aggression. Every human colony, every ship, every individual was connected through quantum communication networks that allowed for immediate coordination across their entire civilization. The real question, Admiral Jawan said, is how we respond to this situation. The Confederation has broken the Terran Compact, whether they remember it or not. Do we simply repair their ships and send them home with a warning, or do we take more decisive action? Director Youngsik pulled up a tactical display showing human space and the surrounding regions. Our deep space observation posts have been monitoring Confederation activities for decades. They've built an impressive civilization, but it's based on the assumption that they're the most advanced species in the galaxy. That assumption is about to be challenged. Captain Yun-Ji's projected image flickered slightly as she spoke from her distant ship. During my encounter with Captain Wanbin, I got the impression that this expedition was authorized at the highest levels of their government. This wasn't a rogue military action. It was official Confederation policy to claim our territory. Then, they'll try again, General Su Jin said grimly, probably with a larger force. They can't accept that a single small ship defeated an entire fleet. Their pride won't allow it. Admiral Jawan nodded sadly. That's what I'm afraid of. We've enjoyed 8 centuries of peace because other species respected our boundaries. If that respect is gone, we may have no choice but to remind them why those boundaries existed in the first place. The Council spent the next several hours reviewing options and scenarios. They could reveal themselves gradually, making contact with reasonable elements within the Confederation government and hoping to re-establish the old agreements. They could demonstrate their capabilities more forcefully, showing enough power to deter future incursions without causing unnecessary harm. Or they could simply defend their borders and hope the Confederation learned to leave them alone. Thorough. Problem with gradual revelation, Director Youngsik pointed out, is that it gives them time to prepare countermeasures. If we're going to make contact, we need to do it from a position of undeniable strength. But if we reveal too much too quickly, Captain Yunji countered, we risk causing exactly the kind of panic that led to the Terran Compact in the first place. The other species couldn't handle knowing about our capabilities then. There's no reason to think they'd handle it better now. General Su Jin studied the tactical displays, her expression thoughtful. There's another consideration. During our isolation, we've developed technologies and techniques that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Medical advances that could extend the lifespans of every species, energy technologies that could end resource conflicts forever, transportation methods that could unite the galaxy in ways previously impossible. Are you suggesting we share our technology? Admiral Jawan asked. I'm suggesting we consider it, Su Jin replied. The Confederation has built something impressive during our absence. They've achieved peace among dozens of species, established trade networks spanning thousands of light years, and created stable governments that have lasted for centuries. Maybe it's time to stop treating them like children who need protection from themselves. Director Youngsik shook his head. They just sent a military fleet to claim our territory without even attempting diplomatic contact. That doesn't sound like the behavior of a mature civilization. No, Admiral Jawan agreed. But it might be the behavior of a civilization that's never encountered anything they couldn't handle through standard diplomatic or military means. They've been the most advanced species in known space for so long that they've forgotten that other possibilities exist. The debate continued for hours, with perspectives and arguments flowing back and forth across the quantum communication network. Representatives from distant colonies shared their views. Deep space explorers reported on Confederation activities in their regions, and military commanders outlined various response scenarios. Finally, Admiral J1 called for a decision. The Confederation will send another fleet. That much is certain. Captain Wanbin's report will convince them that they're dealing with an unknown but limited threat. They'll try to overwhelm us with superior numbers. And when they do? General War, Sujin asked. Jae-won looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders, seeing the same sadness in their eyes that he felt in his own heart. When they do, we'll remind them why the galaxy's maps show empty space where human territory begins. We'll use exactly as much force as necessary to protect our people and our way of life. A limited demonstration of capabilities? Director Young Sik suggested. Limited, but unmistakable, Jae-won confirmed. We'll show them enough to make them reconsider their assumptions about the balance of power in this galaxy. After that, we'll see if they're wise enough to re-establish peaceful relations or stubborn enough to escalate the situation further. Captain Yoon-ji's projection nodded approvingly. And if they choose escalation? Admiral Jae-won turned back to the observation window, looking out at the stars that had sheltered humanity for 8 centuries of peace. Then we'll show them exactly why their ancestors were smart enough to leave us alone. Humanity didn't withdraw from galactic affairs because we were weak, Captain. We withdrew because we were strong enough to recognize that true strength sometimes means restraint. But if restraint fails, General Sujin pressed. Jae-won's reflection in the window showed an expression of infinite sadness and absolute determination. Then the galaxy will remember why they used to have nightmares about waking sleeping giants. We've had 800 years to prepare for this day. I pray we'll never need to use that preparation, but if we do, the emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of receiving Captain Wanbin's report. The Great Hall buzzed with angry voices and heated arguments as representatives from across the galaxy tried to process what they had heard. Counselor Daeho stood at the center of the chamber, his red skin flushed even darker with rage and humiliation. "This is unacceptable," he roared, his forearms gesturing wildly. "A single unknown vessel defeats an entire confederation. Fleet! Captain Wanbin must be either lying or incompetent." Captain Wanbin himself stood nearby, his uniform wrinkled and his face showing the strain of the past few days. "Counselor, I assure you that my report is completely accurate. We were outclassed in every possible way. Their technology operates on principles we don't understand. Their weapons cut through our shields like they weren't there, and their ship moved in ways that our physics says should be impossible." "Physics doesn't lie, Captain," Commander So-young interjected. Her own ship had been among those disabled in the encounter, and she was still struggling to accept what had happened. "There must be a logical explanation for what we experienced. Keeper." Minho stood slowly from his seat in the back of the chamber. His aged voice carried clearly through the hall as he spoke. "There is a logical explanation. I've spent the last 3 days in the deepest archives, and I've found the truth about that region of space." More ancient stories. Counselor Daeho sneered. "Keeper, with all due respect, we need facts, not legends." Minho activated a holographic projector, filling the air above the chamber with images of ancient documents and treaties. "These are facts, Counselor. Legal documents signed by your own ancestors. The region you sent Captain Wanbin to explore is not empty space. It is the sovereign territory of a species called humanity, established by treaty 847 years ago. Murmurs, rippled through the chamber as the representatives examined the projected documents. The treaties were clearly genuine, bearing the official seals of every major galactic power, but most of the assembled leaders had never heard of humans before. "Even if these treaties are genuine," Commander So Young said, "one species cannot claim such a vast region of space. The territory marked on these documents encompasses thousands of star systems. A species can claim whatever territory they can defend," Minho replied grimly. "And based on Captain Wanbin's report, humanity can defend their territory very effectively." "Indeed." Counselor Deho waved dismissively at the holographic documents. "Ancient papers signed by people long dead have no bearing on current reality. The Confederation is the supreme authority in this galaxy. We cannot allow unknown aliens to threaten our expansion and security." "They're not threatening our expansion," Wanbin said desperately. "They're defending their own territory. There's a difference." "No, Captain, there isn't," Deho replied coldly. "Any species that can humiliate a Confederation fleet represents a threat to our authority and security. If we allow this insult to stand, what message does that send to other potential rebels and separatists?" The debate raged for hours, with voices raised on all sides. Some representatives, particularly the older ones, remembered vague stories about the ancient treaties and urged caution. Others, led by the ambitious younger members, saw the situation as an opportunity to demonstrate Confederation strength and unity. Finally, Commander So Young stood to address the chamber. "Regardless of ancient treaties or historical claims, we cannot ignore the security implications of this situation. An unknown species with superior technology poses a direct threat to every member of this Confederation. We need more information about their capabilities and intentions." "I agree," Counselor Deho said, seizing on her words. "Which is why I propose that we send a proper fleet to investigate this situation. Not a small exploration force, but a real military expedition capable of dealing with any threat." Minho struggled to his feet again. "Counselor, you're making a terrible mistake. These humans withdrew from galactic affairs precisely to avoid conflicts like this. If you send a military force into their territory, you'll be forcing them to respond with their own military." "Let them respond," Deho declared. "The combined might of the Galactic Confederation has never been defeated. Whatever technology these humans possess, it cannot stand against the united fleets of a dozen species." The vote was closer this time, but the outcome was the same. By a margin of 68 to 45, the Council authorized a massive military expedition to resolve the human situation. Admiral Bora, the Confederation's most experienced fleet commander, was given command of the largest armada in galactic history. Admiral Bora was a professional soldier who had served with distinction in 3 separate conflicts. She was known for her tactical brilliance and her ability to coordinate complex fleet operations. If anyone could handle the human situation with minimal casualties, it would be her. But as she reviewed the fleet roster in her private quarters, Bora felt a growing sense of unease. The armada under her command included over 200 ships from every major military power in the Confederation. It was an impressive force, capable of conquering entire star systems. Yet something about the whole situation bothered her. She called up Captain Wanbin's detailed report and studied it carefully. The descriptions of human technology were disturbing, particularly the casual ease with which they had disabled Confederation vessels. The fact that they had shown such restraint was perhaps even more concerning than if they had simply destroyed the intruding fleet. "Admiral?" Her aide, Lieutenant Sung Ho, entered her quarters with the final deployment orders. "The fleet is ready to depart on your command." Bo-Ra looked at the young officer, noting his eagerness for action. "Lieutenant, what do you think about this mission?" Sung-Ho straightened proudly. "It's an honor to serve under your command, Admiral. The fleet is confident that we can handle any threat these humans might pose." "And if they're not really a threat?" Bo-Ra asked. "What if they're simply defending their own territory from what they see as an invasion?" The lieutenant looked confused. "Admiral, they attacked a Confederation fleet. That makes them enemies of galactic peace and order." Bo-Ra sighed softly. She had been a soldier for too long not to recognize the difference between aggression and defense. Captain Wan Bin's report made it clear that the humans had responded to a perceived threat, not initiated an unprovoked attack. But the political momentum for military action was too strong to resist. The fleet departed from Zentara Prime in a massive display of Confederation power. Ships from every member species formed up in perfect formations, their hulls gleaming with weapons and armor. The sight would have inspired confidence in any observer, a testament to the unity and strength of galactic civilization. The journey to human space took 6 days, during which Admiral Bo-Ra drilled her fleet in complex tactical maneuvers. She knew that coordination would be crucial if they encountered resistance. The various species in her armada used different technologies and tactics, and welding them into an effective fighting force required careful preparation. As they approached the border of human territory, Bo-Ra's sensors began detecting the same mysterious energy signatures that had puzzled Captain Wan Bin. But this time, instead of a single small vessel, they were met by something that made her blood run cold. A single ship emerged from the depths of space to intercept the armada. But this was no patrol craft. The vessel that appeared before them was massive, easily dwarfing even the largest Confederation dreadnoughts. Its hull was marked with symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched, and energy patterns danced across its surface like living things. "This is Captain Min-jun of the human vessel Incheon's Fury," came the transmission in perfect galactic standard. "Admiral Bo-Ra, you and your fleet are in violation of the Terran Compact and the sovereign boundaries of human space. Withdraw. Immediately." Bo-Ra stared at her tactical display in disbelief. The single human ship was larger than her flagship and 3 escort vessels combined. Its energy readings were off the charts, showing power levels that should have been impossible for any single vessel to generate. "Unknown vessel," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is Admiral Bo-Ra of the Galactic Confederation. You are outnumbered 200 to 1. I strongly advise you to stand down and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Captain Min-jun's response was calm but final. "Admiral, you were warned once. Captain Wan Bin delivered that warning to your government. There will be no second warning. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawing your fleet. This is your final chance." "To surrender," Bo-Ra declared, though she was beginning to suspect that she was the one in the vulnerable position. "All ships prepare for combat operations." The countdown began immediately. 59, 58, 57. Admiral Bo-Ra watched her tactical display as the massive human ship began to move. Despite its enormous size, it moved with the same impossible grace that Captain Wan Bin had described. Her weapons officers reported that they couldn't achieve a targeting lock on something that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. 30, 29, 28. The news of Admiral Bo-Ra's devastating defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours of the fleet's return to Confederation space, Every major communication network was buzzing with reports of the impossible. Half of the most powerful armada in galactic history had been disabled by a single unknown vessel in what witnesses were calling the 5-minute war. Commander So Young sat in her private office aboard the research station Deep Horizon, staring at the tactical recordings that had been transmitted from the battle. As one of the few survivors of the first encounter with humans, she had been tasked with leading a desperate investigation into human capabilities. The recording she was watching made her question everything she thought she knew about technology and warfare. Dr. Tae-hyun, have you finished your analysis of the human weapon signatures? She asked, turning to the brilliant scientist who had been assigned to her research team. Dr. Tae-hyun looked up from his data displays, his expression troubled. Commander, I'm not sure these readings are accurate. According to our sensors, the human weapons operate on principles that shouldn't be possible. They seem to manipulate matter at the molecular level while simultaneously existing in multiple dimensions. Intelligence analyst Hanul joined the conversation from her workstation across the room. It gets worse, Commander. I've been analyzing the fleet deployment patterns, and I don't think we were fighting just one ship. What do you mean? So Young asked. Hanul activated a holographic display showing the battle from multiple angles. Look at the attack patterns. The human vessel struck targets simultaneously across a front spanning thousands of kilometers. Even moving at impossible speeds, a single ship couldn't coordinate attacks with that level of precision across such distances. Dr. Tae-hyun nodded grimly. Hanul is right. I think what we were seeing was a single ship controlling multiple weapon systems distributed throughout local space. The vessel we could see was just the visible component of a much larger defensive network. So Young felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying there were other ships we couldn't detect? I'm saying there were other systems we couldn't detect, Tae-hyun replied. Ships, stations, automated platforms, maybe even weapons, built into the fabric of space itself. The humans appear to have turned their entire territory into one massive defensive system. The research team had been working around the clock for weeks, trying to understand how humanity had achieved such overwhelming technological superiority. Their discoveries were becoming more disturbing with each passing day. Hanul pulled up another set of data, this one showing long-range sensor readings from the edges of human space. Commander, we've been monitoring human territory for the past month, and the scale of their civilization is staggering. We estimate they control thousands of inhabited worlds, each one protected by defensive systems that make them effectively invisible to our sensors. Thousands, So Young repeated in disbelief. That's impossible. No single species has that many colonies. The population estimates are even more shocking, Dr. Tae-hyun added. Based on energy consumption patterns and industrial signatures we can barely detect, we believe human space contains hundreds of billions of individuals. They've built a civilization that dwarfs the entire Galactic Confederation in both size and technological sophistication. So Young reviewed the data herself, checking and rechecking the calculations. The numbers were almost impossible to believe, but the evidence was undeniable. While the Confederation had been expanding slowly and carefully, building trade networks and diplomatic relationships, humanity had been quietly constructing a vast interstellar empire in the hidden depths of their territory. How did they advance so quickly? She asked. 800 years isn't enough time for this level of development. Hanul brought up historical data from the archives. Actually, Commander, it is. We've been comparing their rate of advancement to our own, and we found something disturbing. The Confederation's technological progress has been relatively slow and steady. We advance through cooperation between multiple species, each contributing their own specialties and perspectives. That's always been our strength, So Young agreed. But it's also been our limitation, Dr. Tae-hyun continued. Human advancement appears to have been exponential rather than linear. Without the need to maintain compatibility with alien technologies or coordinate with other species, they could pursue whatever research directions showed the most promise. The scientist activated another display showing theoretical advancement, curves. Look at this projection. If a single species with unified goals and unlimited resources focused entirely on technological development for 8 centuries, this is approximately what they could achieve. So Young studied the projections with growing horror. The curve showed humanity's estimated capabilities accelerating far beyond anything in Confederation science. According to the models, human technology operated on principles that the Confederation wouldn't discover for thousands of years, if ever. There's something else, Hanul said quietly. We've been analyzing the human military response patterns, and we don't think we've seen their actual military yet. What do you mean? The ships that defeated our fleets were identified by their crews as patrol vessels and defensive units. The officers we encountered held relatively junior ranks. Captain Min Jun, who commanded the vessel that destroyed Admiral Bo-Ra's fleet, is apparently equivalent to a mid-level officer in human military hierarchy. Dr. Tae-hyun nodded agreement. The energy signatures we detected suggest that most of their defensive systems are automated. The few humans we've encountered appear to be supervisors rather than operators. Their actual military forces may be mostly machine-based. The implications were staggering. If junior officers commanding patrol vessels could effortlessly defeat the Confederation's best fleets, what could humanity's actual military accomplish? The research team was beginning to realize that they weren't just dealing with a more advanced species, but with a civilization that had evolved beyond anything in known space. Commander, Hanul said, pulling up yet another disturbing analysis. We need to discuss the philosophical implications of what we're discovering. Human technology doesn't just surpass ours in degree. It appears to operate on entirely different principles. She showed recordings of human ships moving through space in ways that violated basic physics. Their vessels don't just travel faster than light. They manipulate space-time itself, folding reality around them to move instantaneously across any distance. Their weapons don't just destroy targets. They can apparently rewrite matter at the molecular level, allowing them to disable enemy systems without causing any collateral damage. And their defenses? So Young asked, though she dreaded the answer. Dr. Tae-hyun brought up sensor readings from the human ships they had encountered. Their defensive systems exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our weapons can't hit them because they're not entirely present in our reality. It's like trying to shoot at a shadow that can choose when and where to become solid. The research team fell silent as they contemplated the full scope of what they had uncovered. Humanity hadn't just been hiding in empty space for 8 centuries. They had been evolving into something far beyond what any other species had imagined possible. There's one more thing, Hanul said reluctantly. I've been analyzing human communication patterns, and I think their entire civilization is connected through some kind of instantaneous network. Every ship, every station, every individual appears to be in constant contact with every other component of their society. A hive mind? So Young asked. No, more like a voluntary collective consciousness. They maintain individual personalities and decision-making capabilities, but they can share information and coordinate actions across their entire civilization instantaneously. When Captain Yunji said her ship was connected to every human mind, she may have been speaking literally. Dr. Tae-hyun pulled up the final piece of their analysis, a comprehensive comparison between human and Confederation capabilities. Commander, based on everything we've discovered, I have to conclude that humanity could have conquered the entire galaxy at any point during the past several centuries. The fact that they chose isolation instead suggests a level of wisdom and restraint that we should find deeply concerning. Concerning? Why? Because it means they're not isolationist by nature, they're isolationist by choice. And if they've decided that their isolation is no longer possible or desirable, So Young understood immediately. A species with unlimited technological superiority that had chosen peace for 8 centuries was not a species to be taken lightly. If humanity decided to abandon their isolation and return to galactic affairs, they would do so from a position of such overwhelming strength that resistance would be futile. "What do you recommend?" she asked her team. Hanul and Dr. Tae-hyun exchanged glances before responding. "Immediate diplomatic contact," Hanul said. "Not military action, not territorial demands, but genuine diplomatic engagement. We need to find out what humanity wants and what it would take to re-establish peaceful relations. And if diplomacy fails, the panic began in the Outer Rim territories and spread inward like a plague. Within days of the news reaching the general population, the carefully maintained stability of the Galactic Confederation began to crumble. Fear of human retaliation caused trade routes to shut down as merchant vessels refused to leave port. Stock markets crashed as investors pulled their assets from any companies with operations near human space. Entire planetary governments recalled their deep space exploration fleets rather than risk encountering the mysterious humans. Diplomat Seong-min stood before the emergency session of the Economic Council on Nexus Prime, watching as centuries of careful economic integration fell apart in real time. The holographic displays around the chamber showed catastrophic drops in trade volume, communication breakdowns between member species, and the beginning of what could only be called an economic collapse. "The situation is unprecedented," economist Eugene reported to the assembled representatives. "In 72 hours, we've seen a 40% drop in interstellar commerce. Shipping companies are canceling routes, miners are abandoning asteroid operations, and tourist travel has virtually ceased." Seong-min nodded grimly. "The psychological impact of the 5-minute war cannot be overstated. For the first time in Confederation history, our citizens have been forced to confront the possibility that we are not the dominant power in this galaxy." The economic data was devastating, but it was only the beginning. Reports were flooding in from across Confederation. Space about civil unrest, military desertions, and political upheaval. The knowledge that humanity possessed overwhelming technological superiority had shattered the confidence that held galactic civilization together. On the military station, Fortress Alpha, General Kang Dae was dealing with a crisis that threatened the very foundation of Confederation defense. Nearly 30% of his forces had requested transfers away from border regions, and several entire units had simply abandoned their posts rather than risk encountering human forces. "Sir," his aide Lieutenant Parkman reported, "we've received formal protests from the governments of 12 member species. They're demanding that the Council reverse its decision to confront humanity and immediately begin peace negotiations." General Kang Dae studied the tactical displays showing the deployment of Confederation forces. Red indicators marked the positions where units had withdrawn without authorization, creating dangerous gaps in the defensive perimeter. Lieutenant, what's the status of our border monitoring stations? 17 stations have gone dark, sir. The crews evacuated when they detected human energy signatures in their sectors. They report that human vessels appeared without warning, conducted what appeared to be reconnaissance activities, and then vanished again. The implications were clear and terrifying. Human forces were moving freely throughout Confederation space, observing and cataloging military installations with impunity. They weren't attacking anything, but their mere presence served as a constant reminder that they could strike anywhere at any time. But the human strategy was far more sophisticated than simple intimidation. Fleet Admiral Kyung-ho, commanding the human forces conducting what they termed perimeter enforcement, had carefully planned a campaign of psychological warfare that was more devastating than any direct military action could have been. Human ships began appearing at major trade hubs throughout the galaxy, not threatening or interfering with commerce, but simply observing. The vessels would materialize from nowhere, maintain position for several hours while conducting detailed scans of everything in the system, and then vanish as mysteriously as they had arrived. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Knowing that humanity could reach any location in Confederation space whenever they chose, civilian populations began to panic. If humans could appear anywhere at will, what was to stop them from conquering entire worlds without warning? On the research station Deep Horizon, Commander So Young watched the unfolding crisis with growing despair. Her investigation into human capabilities had revealed the scope of their technological superiority, but she had never imagined how quickly that knowledge would destabilize galactic civilization. "Commander," Dr. Tae-hyun reported from his analysis. "Station, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout human space. It appears they're activating previously dormant systems on a scale we can barely comprehend. The sensor readings showed power signatures that dwarfed anything in Confederation. Science. Entire star systems within human territory were lighting up with energy patterns that suggested industrial capabilities beyond imagination. Whatever humanity was preparing for, they were mobilizing resources that could reshape the galaxy. Meanwhile, in the deepest archives of Zentara Prime, Keeper Min-ho worked frantically with his research team to uncover more details about humanity's original role in galactic civilization. Historians Ji-young and Dong-wook had discovered records that painted an even more disturbing picture of what the Confederation had awakened. "Keeper," Ji-young said, her voice filled with awe and terror. "We've found records of humanity's original function in galactic society. They weren't just peacekeepers or mediators. They were the guardians of civilization itself." Min-ho looked up from the ancient documents he was studying. "What do you mean?" Dong-wook activated a holographic display showing historical records from the earliest days of interstellar society. According to these archives, humanity stepped in whenever conflicts threatened to destroy the bonds that held galactic civilization together. They prevented 3 separate species from developing planet-killing weapons. They stopped 2 different wars that could have consumed entire sectors. They even intervened when one species developed technology that could have destabilized local space-time. They were the ultimate safety net, Ji-young continued. Other species could pursue their own goals and ambitions, knowing that if things went too far, humanity would step in to prevent total catastrophe. Min-ho felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him. And when they withdrew, they left. "Detailed protocols and warning systems," Dong-wook explained. "The ancient treaties weren't just agreements about territorial boundaries, they were instructions for maintaining galactic stability without human oversight. The problem is that most of those protocols have been forgotten or ignored. The old keeper realized with growing horror that the Confederation's decision to challenge humanity hadn't just violated territorial agreements. It had demonstrated that the younger species were no longer capable of governing themselves responsibly. By sending military fleets into human space, the Confederation had proven that they had learned nothing from 8 centuries of human guidance. "What happens now?" Ji Young asked. Minho looked at the ancient records one more time, noting the careful language used by humanity's representatives centuries ago. "Now we discover whether humanity still believes we can be trusted to govern ourselves, or whether they've decided that direct intervention is once again necessary." The answer came sooner than anyone expected. As panic continued to spread throughout Confederation space and economic systems collapsed under the weight of fear and uncertainty, a transmission arrived from human space that changed everything. Thutter. Message was broadcast simultaneously on every communication frequency in the galaxy, reaching every inhabited world within minutes. The transmission bore the official seal of human government, and the speaker was identified as President In-Ho, representing all of humanity. "People of the galaxy," the message began, and the calm authority in the human leader's voice was unmistakable. "You have forgotten who we are, so you have forgotten who you could be. The old compact that maintained peace between our peoples has been broken, not by humanity, but by your own actions." The transmission continued with devastating clarity. "For 8 centuries, we withdrew from galactic affairs to allow other species the opportunity to prove they could govern themselves wisely. We hoped that you would learn from our example and build a civilization based on cooperation, mutual respect, and peaceful resolution of conflicts." President In-Ho's image appeared on screens throughout the galaxy, showing a being whose apparent youth belied the ancient wisdom in their eyes. "In many ways, you exceeded our expectations. The Galactic Confederation achieved stability among dozens of species, established trade networks that brought prosperity to countless worlds, and maintained peace for centuries. We were proud of your accomplishments." The tone of the message shifted, becoming more somber. "But recent events have demonstrated that you have forgotten the most important lessons we tried to teach. When faced with the unknown, your first response was military force. When challenged by superior technology, your reaction was to escalate rather than negotiate. You have shown that your civilization's strength was built on the assumption that you were the most powerful force in the galaxy." The final words of the transmission carried the weight of inevitable judgment. "The old compact is broken, but we offer you a new one. Humanity will resume its role as guardian of galactic civilization, but only for those species wise enough to accept our guidance. Those who wish to remain independent may do so, but they forfeit our protection and must accept the consequences of their choices."